everyone. Welcome to Civic Leadership Forum. Your voice is your vote. Today is 2021, July 20th. This is the third Silicon Valley Civic Leadership Forum in 2021. And Ding TV and CLUSA started Civic Leadership Forum Silicon Valley since 2016. And Currents become a co-organizer since 2017. We organize this forum 4 times a year. So over 2,000 students, community leaders, parents, elected officials have participated. The contents from the forum have reached to 200,000 people in Silicon Valley Bay Area and the United States. This forum provided a platform to empower the next generation in civic engagement and civic leadership in America communities, while create national network of civic-minded organizations and leaders to work together. Today is the third Civic Leadership Forum, and the organizers are 8x8, Ding TV, and CLUSA. We partners with ethnic groups and different medias. So with that, I would like to thank to our partners, United National Asian Americans, and the Asians are visible, and Silicon Valley Insider. I also want to thank AAUC, AAPI, Andy Lee, and many other community leaders for promoting this event. This event is also live streaming on YouTube right now, and also we have audience on Clubhouse. At Clubhouse, we have a club called Asian Americans Network. In 3 months, we already have over 800 members on that club. Same time, and we have Hong Yue and Sandy Wong are moderating at the Clubhouse. So Hong, would you like to say hi to all the speakers and friends here? Okay.
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm speaking to you on Zoom, but I will certainly put on mute later on. Since I'm also moderating the folks on Clubhouse, and I'm going to pipe them in. If I'm constantly on Zoom and Clubhouse, there will be a lot of echo. All right. Thanks so much to the speakers and the moderators. I really appreciate this. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hong. And Hong is a Vietnamese American community leader, and also we work together on Silicon Valley Central Chamber of Commerce. And we also have Sandy working on Clubhouse right now. Hi, Sandy, you there? Thank you for all the work behind the scenes. Okay, with that, I'm going to give the microphone to our co-organizer, the co-founder of 8x8, Bing Wei, to start the first panel discussion. Bing, the microphone is yours.
Okay, thanks, Diana. We are very honored to have a very prestigious guest over here. I'll introduce my panel, which is former Congressman Makonda and our current state treasurer, Fiona Ma, and our Plateau City Council member, Greg Tanaka, and our 18-year-old co-founder of 8x8 Asian Voters Network, Tyler Ratcliffe. So without much ado, we're going to dive into Asian American voting issues. And as we know, we just going through the People's Act, which passed in Congress and blocking Senator. And let me share screen of looking at the status of what's Asian American voting situation in the last few years. So in California itself, we have 4 million eligible voters, and there is an increase in the last couple of years from the registration of voting. However, even that, the total AAPI share of electoral in this state is only 17%. And in 2020, there is definitely a huge turnout compared to 2016. However, Asian Americans continue to be underrepresented, especially in the political presence as well as the electoral voting. So I want to start my first question to our panels. Let me stop sharing the screen. With the situation of Asian Americans make up 6% of our American population in the whole United States. and the registration to vote is only 17%. What's you are thinking of how to encourage Asian American to register to vote, the best method you can look into? I'll ask Greg Tanaka first. You need to mute yourself.
Sorry, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, let me thank you for organizing this panel and for the opportunity. I think this is a really important question. Asian Americans, unfortunately, tend to be not as engaged in registering to vote or voting in general. I think that's a big problem. So this is probably one of the reasons what motivated me to start 8x8, which is basically to get 8 people to register to vote in 8 days. The idea behind 8 is it's a lucky Chinese number. So we thought that it'd be kind of a way to make people remember it. And what we're trying to do with it is most traditional voter registration programs are really about awareness, trying to get awareness, trying to get people to say, hey, you got to register to vote. This is the date. And that's the main idea behind it. With 8x8, we try to take this one step further. And it's kind of modeled after the Ice Bucket Challenge for ALS, where we're trying to use some social pressure. So people are going to use social media to call out 8 of their friends to basically register to vote in 8 days. And so you have a bit of that social pressure rather than just awareness. And then the second thing is incentivize with food, like free food. So I found that just offering just a little bit of free food does wonders in terms of motivating people. And this is literally what we did at our rally in May. So I think some of the participants like former Congressmember Honda and Fiona also participated. But we did this in a live setting, and later on, I think Tyler will talk a little bit more about what we've done in terms of trying to take this next level and automating it. But I think one of the things that we could do to move the needle from just pure awareness, which is what most voter registration programs are about, is use a bit of the social pressure plus incentives like free food to motivate Asian Americans to register to vote and to get our voter registration from like 49% to something much higher, like hopefully like 70%. And the other thing that this program does, which is nice, is that it also gives some of the Asian-owned businesses, the restaurants, a chance to also get some promotion and also supporting a good cause. But it's a very good question. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. And so Treasurer Fiona Ma, you were elected 2018 with more votes than 7 million than any other candidate for treasurer in the state's history. And you're also the first woman color and first woman CPA to be elected to the position. So what's your trick and secret sauce to get voting, not only for you, but in general? What's your thinking of the inspiration to encourage Asian Americans to vote?
Yeah, so I've been elected to 4 different offices. And my first one was really difficult, running for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in the Sunset District, where half the district was Asian Pacific Islanders, the other half was like Irish, Italians. But trying to get our community to register and to show up was not easy. And I found, number one, getting people involved in a campaign just to volunteer. Free food is definitely how you can get volunteers to come. But on election day or before election day, because we used to have absentee ballots, right? You need to physically go and chase those ballots with your volunteers. I like to have a lot of interns, young people in my office. And so they would actually be assigned to make sure, their parents, their grandparents, the uncles and aunts submit their ballots during election time. And I can tell you that sometimes my brother and sister-in-law didn't vote for me because I would call them and I would say, I hope you're voting. And they would say, yes, 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 I'm voting, on election day. And then it comes to 8 o'clock at night and they said, oh, I got stuck at work, or, oh, I was cooking dinner and I had to help the girls with homework. I'm sorry I didn't vote. So even my own family, when I'm on the ballot, sometimes doesn't vote. So you need to go and look people in the eye, go and knock on their door, shake their hand, and ask them to please commit to voting. And if they commit to voting 9 out of 10 times, I think they are actually gonna go and commit to, and go and vote on election day. But it is not easy, and you have to keep reminding, and sometimes you have to chase ballots.
That's great tip, and also a lot of effort. So Honorable Congressman Mark Honda, you were not only representing California 15 and 17 districts from 2001 to 2017, and also during that time, you were also elected as the vice chairman of the Democrat National Convention. So as a godfather for Asian American politician, what's your message for the methods of encouraging Asian American registered to vote?
Well, first of all, don't believe your own legend. That's one thing. Two, always remember that there was always someone that's helped you along the way and tried to figure out how you can replicate that help with other people, and constantly being on the lookout for recruiting. For instance, San Jose, we want city council people to run. There's a woman by the name of Tamiko Rask, who's very active, but doesn't want to run. And we just have to pull people together to work with them and convince them that, they will get a lot of support from the community. You mentioned that there was 4 million eligible voters in California who are Asian Americans, and you said 17% of them are registered to vote. But there's a lot of other questions we have to ask ourselves when we look at statistics. Who are these folks that are not registered to vote, who are eligible? What languages are they? Because Asian Americans we're over 22 groups. So we need to look at recruitment based upon what's best and how they best communicate within our community. For instance, the Cambodians, a lot of them don't look at written things, it's word of mouth. And you have to find a person in that community that's, the person that they look to communicate within themselves. So we have a lot of work within our own diasporas to figure out how we're going to be able to communicate with them, and then get them to feel like their voices count and their votes count. Language access, we got laws that says it has to be a certain percentage before you can put it in a language in the on the ballots. But we have social media, and we could put up kiosks where folks can go to look at something in the language they understand and the issues that they understand, so that they can vote. We're not taking full advantage of the technology out there in order to communicate and tell people, we need your vote, we think you're important, and just touching them in the way that they understand and they respond to most positively.
Yeah, I really totally agree. The language access for the diaspora community, which is a huge element. We have an increase of over 50% in California of foreign-born immigrants in the last few years. And however, with the total population 23 million in the United States of AAPI community, we only have 3% of National Congress who are Asians. And in California itself, 7% presented in the state political office. So want to see what are your thoughts on increasing both our voting ratio, especially our political representation? Maybe our treasurer, Fiona Ma, can take lead on discussing that.
Before I do, I was just going to add to Mike Honda's comments. I remember when I first ran, I would carry an accordion envelope, and I would have my message, my bio, my message in different languages. It would be in Chinese, Russian, Tagalog, Japanese, Korean. And like Mike said, we're a big community. And when you give something to a person in their native language, especially if English is not their first language, they are so excited that you have taken that extra effort. And it's amazing because they will go back to their family and friends or church members and start talking about you. So again, you have to be able to communicate in a language that they're most comfortable with.
Yeah,
I think we were talking about Congress. Did you ask me about Congress?
just general, both Congress and the state's political office, where we are very underrepresented. And we're very glad you're there.
Yeah, so again, like Mike said, there are members of our community who are leaders who we would like to encourage them to run, but some of them just don't know how to do it. They're nervous, they're scared. There's a lot of, rumors, innuendos about running for office. So I would say, number one, go get into one of these training programs. There are a lot of training programs out there for people who are thinking about running. Sometimes they're boot camps, sometimes they're a little bit longer. So try to enroll in as many as you can. I would also try to get appointed to a local or state board or commission. That's where you actually learn about Robert's Rules of Order and the Sunshine Act and Brown Act, all the important rules that you need to know if you're going to be an elected official. And then third, I would definitely intern for an elected official or volunteer on campaigns. It is so essential that if you want to run for office, you need to know how to campaign and you need to know how to get volunteers, right? Hire your right consultant, speak to the media. And those are some of the things that you can learn working on a campaign. And then working in an elected official's office is more about policy, right? If you're interested in a certain area, that is a great way to dip your feet into, what your platform is going to be, what you're going to advocate for, where you can be an expert so that others will look to your leadership when you get elected or you're running for office.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very inspirational, educational. What do you think, Congressman Makonda, to the methods to increase our Asian American political representation?
Well, I think all the Asian American population, they all have their own organizations, correct? And so organizing it's not a new thing. We just got to convince them that how they organize in their own diaspora is no different than in any other. They just have to have that confidence, and we have to sort of, like Fiona said, expose them to arenas where they can get exposure to other things, but also practice leadership. Just because a person is president of an organization does not make that person a thought leader. And just because a person says, I want to run for office, does not mean that they deserve Asian votes. They should be held to some sort of value system that we believe in, like affirmative action, social justice, criminal justice, those kinds of things where we have certain kinds of grills that we sort of sift people through our process of selecting and recruiting. And looking for young people, there's a lot of young people out there that have the burning desire to serve. And like Fiona said, we should put them into offices of elected office, but they be placed not to collect paper clips and move papers around, but to be exposed to different aspects of the office and why that office is important, and to be given responsibility in that office so that they understand that they too can have those skills to be able to do that. Putting people in office to just be there and being present, and make the parents feel good that, my kid's there, but it's to no avail. It's no value if we don't take their time and their presence and put them into reasonable and meaningful activities. So yeah, we have that responsibility for the young people, and we have also to see our community not as a community that doesn't have any organization. They all have ways of organizing themselves and running their organization, and those skills are usable in politics and policymaking. And we just gotta encourage these folks to understand that and then practice it, and then make sure that we expose them to a value system that I think is important, and that's our constitutional integrity.
Yeah, that's very true. Now, Congressman Greg Tanaka, you've been running for Palo Congress for 2 terms. This is second term, and you're running, for the National Congress 2022, and also you are guiding and mentoring over 20 interns for this summer. And what your thoughts are mentoring more Asian American political candidates or increasing our own political representation? You need to unmute.
I keep forgetting. Okay, yeah. So one of the big reasons why I have my internship program for my city council member office is because I want to encourage the next generation. We want to build a pipeline. So a lot of, like, for me, if I look at myself when I was in high school, I was very much a STEM kid, very much engineering, science, math kind of kid, and I didn't do student government. I wasn't really terribly involved, and I think really, I think what's important is to expose Asian Americans to this other side, right? To the more civic engagement area. And for me, I've probably at this point in time, I've had probably maybe 70, 80 interns through my program. And one thing that makes me really happy is that a lot of them actually, after going through my program, they're like, hey, I'm gonna be a poli-sci major, or I'm gonna run for elected office one day, right? And to me, I'm really proud of that, because I know, like, when I was in high school, I certainly wasn't thinking that. I might be, if you read my yearbook, might be the guy most likely not to run for political office. And so to me, it's giving those opportunities so that people can see what it's like, the kind of change you could have, and also to see that there's something that looks like them actually in office. I think that's really important. I think it's very important to have role models. And I think Asian Americans have done extremely well in many areas like law, medicine, engineering. But in terms of politics, we are really lagging compared to most other ethnicities. I remember when I talked to my dad about running for Palo City Council in 2016. And like, most offices, you have to raise money, right? So I hit my dad up for money. He donated to Obama's campaign and Hillary's campaign. I asked him to donate to my campaign. And my dad was like, no, I'm not going to donate to your campaign. He told me he didn't think Asians should be in politics. He thought that we should keep our heads down, our mouths shut. His attitude was like, the nail that sticks up gets nailed down. And I'm like, God, what a bad attitude, right? He just incredibly unsupportive, right? He felt like we were guests in this country, and like, my great grandfather came here from Hiroshima in 1880, so we've been here for over 100 years, and if we're guests in this country, I mean, to me, I was kind of floored by his kind of mentality, and when I told him that I was going to run for U.S. Congress, he told me, Greg, if you're going to stay, if you're going to run, stay in politics, you got to move to Hawaii, because Asians aren't liked in California. Like, this really incredible, even though, like, given the stat you talked about in terms of what percentage of Asians are in California, what percentage, like in Santa Clara County, Asians are 38% of the population. We're actually the largest ethnicity in the county, and so I think these kind of thinking has to change, right? And I think this thinking can be changed by giving people opportunities. So I want to encourage my fellow elected officials to give opportunities, internships, chief of staff, right? Opportunities for Asian Americans to get involved in politics. And I've seen the change that can happen when you do this for people. So I think it's really important that we give these opportunities, especially as Asian Americans in office, to others, so that the next generation will maybe follow in our footsteps and perhaps even go further than us.
Fiona, you were raising your hand.
Yeah, can I just add?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was like Greg. My parents did not encourage me to run for student body president. They just wanted me to get straight A's, and I played an instrument. I played the flute and the percussions, and I excelled in sports. So I played 4 sports in junior high and high school. And it really wasn't until I was 28 years old, when I became president of the Asian Business Association, that I started to understand how important it is to be at the table, that people are making decisions, that they don't look like us, they don't think like us, they don't think about us, unless we are at the table, both for policy and for funding. And so that's when I started. And like Greg, I've had 1,000 interns now come through my office. And like Mike says, a lot of the parents want their kids to intern in the office, to put their, that on their resume. But what we do is we actually try to change their hearts and minds and talk to them about the value of public service, that it is an honorable profession. And even my dad and mom, when I ran for supervisor, they were like, why are you giving up your accounting career? When I ran for the state assembly, they also said, why do you keep running for office? You're not making money. Go back and be an accountant. And then I ran for the Board of Equalization, and that was a tax board, so they were a little bit happier. And now, as the treasurer of California, my parents actually are finally proud because they understand that role. So like Greg said, his father is like, oh, well, why are you doing that? But if Greg gets elected, I'm sure his dad's going to be very, very proud. But I do think our parents are nervous for us. They don't want us to put ourselves out there, to be negatively viewed, to get hurt. And ultimately, I think our parents don't understand how to support us, Greg. They want to, give advice, right? But they've never done it before. So their backup is, oh, maybe you shouldn't try it because you could lose, or, it may be too hard for you. So you should go back and do what you know how to do, which is what they want us to do ultimately, right? So I think, trying to get your parents' support is very, it was a struggle for me. It took 8 years for me to run for office. And that's because my parents finally gave up and moved to Las Vegas. But I also was always looking for my parents to give me the approval to run for office.
Yeah, role model is essential in any profession you go into, right? So we have a great role model here, Honorable Congressman Honda. So what was your inspiration when you were running for office? At that time, there's very rare any Asian politicians around. Did you get your parents' support, or you just, determined you're going to do this yourself?
Well, my dad just wanted me to be a doctor so I could buy a nice big home and go 3 days a week, But I think a comment to our parents, though, they experienced a certain personal history, so they're responding to that. And so in my mind, I see them as being selfish for us in wanting us to be successful as they had dreamed to be successful. So given that, I think that we just have to understand that they're being selfish for us, wanting the best, but then our job is to sort of, move on beyond that. And so, Greg, your father did a terrible job raising you, but he did a wonderful job in giving you and Fiona the perception that there's something else that needs to be addressed. And if we forget who we are, where we came from in our history in this country, we're doomed to be just white. Okay? White folks have gone through the same thing we have gone through. They've been discriminated against, they've been put down, but as they moved through the generations, they blended in and became part of the mainstream. And so they forgot that they fought for religious freedom, they fought for bilingual education, they fought for recognition of their culture and everything else like that. But on the East Coast, they forgot all that. We're more recent, so it's very new to us. It's still fresh, so we should not forget all that stuff and not set aside, but to take who we are and make it part of the American way of thinking and being. We don't have to be white to be heard. We don't have to be white to lead. And we don't have to be boisterous and loud in order to be heard. It's just that we have our certain ways. And with Fiona, I know that she takes every position that she's had and taught people about what it is to be Board of Equalization, Control and Treasure, because a lot of people don't know what that is. And she's taking time to teach the Asian American community how important those things are and how to take advantage of it. So we have to remember who we are, where we come from, and not be ashamed of our language, but see it as a plus, because rich folks in the old days used to send their kids to Europe to learn French, German. Why? Because they knew it was important. And in this country, we diminish the language and make everybody speak English so they'll be Americans. No, if you got Mandarin or Cantonese or other languages, you become doubly powerful in terms, no matter what work you engage in. And so we have to, reconfigure what it is that we want our kids to be able to become as they go through public education, and not become assimilated, but become acculturated. And we want this country to, take on our characteristics because it's worked for us.
Yeah, totally agree. How to make it work for us. So, Treasurer, State Treasurer Fiona Ma, so what inspired you to run for office so many times, and what keeps on going? So our event is actually following your slogan, your vote is your voice. So how did it keep you going? You have, no support from parents until quite recent. I'd be interested to hear your story.
Yeah, so like I said, it took 8 years for me to run for my first office. And because it took so long, I was hungry when I got the opportunity to run for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in the Sunset District, which was the Chinese seat. And I ran. There were 7 other candidates in the race, but I felt like I worked harder because, number one, I don't want my parents to say I told you so. Number 2, I didn't want to go back and be an accountant anymore. And that's kind of been the themes for all of my races. And sometimes doors open up for you. Sometimes you have an open seat. Sometimes you're running against an incumbent, which is difficult. Sometimes it's a little luck and timing. But if this is something that is your calling, like Congressman Mike Honda, myself, and Greg, we have a long-term view of it, and we're going to be patient, and we're going to look for those opportunities to serve if we can. And an elected office, it's like musical chairs. You hope when the music stops, you have a chair. If not, sometimes you have to wait for the next round. But that's kind of what we do, and just opportunities have opened up to run for the next level up. And every experience is a gift. I'm excited and I love every job I'm in. And every time someone says, well, if you love that job, you should try this job. And then I try that job and I love that job as well. So I just think getting as much experience as you can whenever you can. And honestly, to find mentors like Congressman Mike Honda. He's been supporting me and mentoring me and showing up at all of my events since my first race. And so you also need people in your corner, not only to legitimize your race, but also to show you how to do it, what the pathway is, what the barriers are going to be, how to overcome, some of these obstacles. And so it's important to find mentors as well.
That's a very good point.
I only stuck with her because I was afraid of her.
Fierce Fiona Ma. Keep on going, never stop.
There's an aspect to our experience that we need to talk about also, and that's the alliances that we built up outside of our own group, because Asians cannot elect Asians alone. And so, I've watched Fiona work with her other boss, John Burton, And that man was a powerful man in the state of California. She earned his respect and she earned his support because he knew the kind of work that she could do, in spite of the fact that, you know, she looked different, had a different background. But the Burtons was able to give her their influence also, and she wielded it in a very astute way. And so building coalitions among other communities is going to be important. And being true to the common values that we have and the common goals that we have is important. And we need to be not afraid of engaging our community, but not afraid to also develop coalitions with other communities and learn their ways and their language.
Yes, indeed. The Asian community itself is very diverse, has a lot of different communities and a lot of different languages. Like Councilmember Tanaka is half Chinese, half Japanese. And so question to you, come back to you. You've been evolving as a civic leader through the Stop Asian Hate movements and sparking a new movement calling for Asian Americans to vote by starting the 8x8 initiative. What you hope to see the Asian turnout in the next few years, and especially with the increasing turnout after the AAPI movement? You need to mute, unmute.
Yeah, sorry, I switched my computer, so I don't see the mute. Anyways, yeah, so Bing, thank you for the question. I think this is a good question. You know, one community I really admire is the Jewish community, and I admire the Jewish community because even though I think they're a smaller percentage of the population than Asian Americans, but they really have a lot of unity. They actually have quite a bit of political power, and they're very effective. And I look at that community, and even though they're smaller than the Asian American community in the United States, they have incredible influence on the politics, right? And I look at how they are organized, and I would love to see the Asian American community to be as organized, to get as involved, to run for office, to hold office as the Jewish community. That's what I like to see. I think, you know, there's a lot of parallels. I think Jewish community is also very educated as are most Asian Americans. And you know, a lot of Asian Americans have been very successful as in the Jewish community, but we don't have the same level of political involvement from running for office, from donating, to what Fiona was talking about earlier in terms of participating in political campaigns. I think we don't have that kind of pattern in our community yet. And that's something which I would love for us to get there, right? So it starts with registering to vote, but it has to go all the way through political office. Otherwise, like you said, we're going to only have, you know, 3% Asian Americans in Congress, even though the population may be 6-7%, right? And so I think in order to get proper representation, I think we have to be more unified than we are. But it's hard, right? Because Asia is, you know, if you look at it from the global perspective of the 8 billion people on Earth, it's a huge label. It covers so many different continents, right, and subcontinents, and so it's a really broad label for lots of different people. But I'm hoping that, you know, if we look at all the darkness that's happened with all the Asian hate over the past few years, and what I'm hoping is that the silver lining is going to be that there's some rallying behind being Asian in the United States, right? In terms of trying to combat racism against Asians, in terms of trying to, you know, have effective laws that stop Asian hate. Because I know there's a lot of Asian hate reported, but very little of it is actually prosecuted. You know, I remember when I saw the spokesperson in Atlanta talk about how the 6 Asian American women got killed, and it's just, you know, the guy was having a bad day type of attitude, and just made me think about how that guy could say that and get away with it, because, you know, probably his superiors, none of his superiors are Asian, right? Probably in Atlanta, Georgia, there's probably not that many Asian Americans, and probably he didn't have to answer to them, right? There's no voice, there's no political power for Asian Americans. But if you look at the same thing for the Jewish community, they are very effective, very organized. And so I think there's a lot we can learn from the Jewish community. in terms of how do we get to that level of organization. But although it is harder because Asians are not a religion like it is for the Jewish community, but we have had moments of things that can kind of rally us from the Asian hate recently, to even back during World War II, when all the Japanese Americans, 120,000 Japanese Americans got put into concentration camps, or the Chinese Exclusion Act. So we've had these moments, but we haven't really capitalized on it. And I'm hoping that we can, I'm hoping some of the good that will come out of all the bad that has happened is that we will be more unified, more organized, and actually start flexing some of our political muscle, right? Or start developing that political muscle, because I think Asian Americans, we are just as qualified as anyone else. We're just as educated. In fact, I'll say we're probably more educated than most other ethnicities. We work crazy hard, right? I think we're as smart as others. Yet, we never get our time in the sun, right? We're viewed it by some other ethnicities as the ATM, right? We're viewed as the carpet to kind of walk on, right? We're like the punching bag. And so why is that? Why don't we have representation? Why do we have to defer to others? Why is it not our time to be leaders, right? To have representation. And so I think our time, I think we should do less of deferring to others and more stepping up, because I see other ethnicities step up who are probably less qualified than a lot of Asian Americans, and yet Asian Americans don't step up. So yeah. I'm hoping that we can see a change with this.
Yeah, I agree. I think the confidence to step up and the importance of unity is essential. And horizontally, we need to unify different diversity of minorities, but also on the vertical level, the youth in the election of 2020 has a turnout reached an all-time high of over 50%. And so we have a youth co-founder, Tyler here, 18-year-old, co-founded the 8x8 Asian Voters Network. Wanted Tyler to share your thoughts about the importance of youth register to vote and the app you're developing to help young people to register vote faster and easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Bing. Great to be here with everyone. I think for me, from my perspective, the thing that makes youth registration really important, besides the obvious goal of we want as many people of all ages registered to vote as possible, is that when you're, say, 16 years old, which is when in California you become eligible to pre-register, it's that time when habits are being formed. And it's those habits that more often than not are what's going to stick with you into your adult life. So if you can start voting by 18, start pre-registering at 16, you're probably going to keep voting in the future. And on top of that, voter registration is really just the first step in the process of getting involved politically. So if you get that done when you're young, it's more likely that you're going to volunteer on a campaign, or join an organization, or even run for office yourself. And that's the kind of political activity that we're ultimately looking to see, and the kind of exposure that you're able to get through the office, the internships that Greg offers or that Fiona offers. And then in terms of what we're actually doing to encourage that, I think what's really important to remember, and this is something that applies not only just to youth, but to all age groups, is that young people may have their own set of motivations for registering or not registering to vote. And because of that, what we really need to do is tailor solutions to fit those needs. So going back to your question about the 8x8 app that we're working on, one thing we're trying to do with that is use social media and social pressure to specifically target people who are under 30, with the goal of starting to build those lifelong voting habits as early on as we can, and to use specific solutions for each age group. And none of these solutions are going to be one size fits all, but that's exactly why we want to engage our youth voters in the process of creating them, because it's only really through getting the input of people in those age groups that we're going to be able to develop solutions that work for them. Yeah,
fantastic answer. Yeah, I'm also hoping that particular app can have multi-language function too. So it's easy to press the button and then follow the instruction. So now we open the panel to the audience to see anybody have any questions in the next 15 minutes before the second panel come on board. So you can raise your hand or type your questions into the chat, which is probably easier to see.
And maybe while we're waiting, Bing, I have a couple things just to add to the other speakers. So I know that the three main panelists were all elected officials, but there are other roles for people to participate if they don't want to run for office. Because like my chief of staff, she does not want to be in elected office. She likes being, behind the scenes, making things happen. And if you have a gift, like you're good at websites or filming or photography, I mean, all of these skills can be effective and for elected officials or on campaigns. So, you can contribute whatever your talent is. Also, if you are thinking about running for office, like Tyler said, you can register or prepare at 16, register at 18. And Mike and Greg and I know our opponents always want to track whether we voted for the last 10 elections. So, if you're going to have a spotty track record of voting and then all of a sudden you decide you want to run for a big office, yet you haven't really voted consistently, your credibility is not really going to be as strong. And then third, Tyler talked about social media. Be careful what you put on social media, because what you put on social media never goes away. So if you're going to run for office someday, people are going to find things that you have posted. So stay positive, right? You can be creative, but really just try to stay positive, because that will help you in the long run.
Yeah, these are great tips, and also different roles everybody can play to get more involved, especially what Greg said, it is our time now, and we should have the confidence to step up and to look into different aspects of involvement, whether being an intern and whether being the chief staff, like Fiona said, and also Mike being a mentor, which is so valuable to all the upcoming new generations of Asian politicians. So we can take question now. You can raise your hand or type your questions in the chat group. We are very quiet Asian audience, have no questions.
Let me make a comment while we're still waiting. Like,
Okay.
I'll take advantage of it as Fiona did. If we look at politics right now, you have to ask yourself, why are the Republicans trying to suppress our votes? And the answer is because they realize they're becoming less of a population in this country, and that the minority populations become the majority. But the majority is not going to be able to wield any influence unless we vote and understand the power of the vote and make sure that that's what they're trying to take away from us. And you got to ask yourself why, because they realize that if we exercised our vote, we would run this country. And as a collective population, if we know how to work among ourselves, then we can really take this country in the right direction. So the Latinos a few years ago says, tu voz es tu voto, your voice is your vote, like Fiona is saying. And this comparison to the Jewish folks, we have to be careful about that also. The Jewish faith, because if you look at it, it's their faith, it's not their nationality, because they run the whole gamut, right? Just like Islam and Christianity, Buddhism, they're all of different ethnic backgrounds. And so you have to ask yourself, what was it about the Jewish experience that made them influential in this country? Is because they were persecuted. They were persecuted. And they were persecuted in Europe, and there was no political will to support them. So in this country, they made Israel important. And anybody who was anti-Israel was anti-them. But now in the AAPIs and the different Jewish groups are splintering in the sense that it's more mature. They're becoming a lot less hooked to the Jewish politics, because I didn't really like Netanyahu. He was right of center. But what we have to understand is that what made the Japanese American active was being in camp. Well, we're 2 generations away from it, and we don't have that fear. But we should have that fear in this country for Asian Americans as a collective population, because the way our government treats Asia, if we don't see them treating Asia with respect, we can't expect them to treat us with respect.
Yeah, that's very true.
And so anytime our country goes off and blaming Asia for this, that, and the other, we have to speak up and say that's not right. That doesn't mean the Asian countries are perfect, but going after them, they're coming after us. Save the whales turn out to be Japanese. Go back where you came from.
Mm.
The motor industry, they killed Vincent Chen.
Yeah.
They thought he was Japanese. And so it doesn't matter in this country what Asian group we belong to. We better understand how we're looked at by our own government and the power structure that looks at us.
Yeah.
And so Fiona's right. It's about being hungry and about having power, but having the power to demonstrate who we are rather than to demonstrate our power in ways that, is non-productive.
Yeah.
And so I think if we understand that dynamics in our government, how they treat Asia, and then how they treat us, because let's face it, Biden has not selected a lot of Asian Americans in his administration. It's only after Tammy said, "You're not going to get my cooperation until you put somebody, more people who look like us."
Yeah.
If you want your administration to look like America, then there better be some more Asian faces there.
I agree. Even in the foreign offices, a lot of them, Singapore ambassador never Asian, so white male. So this is not really a proper representation what America looks like. So we have a question for you, Mike, from our audience. What is your lesson learned in your political experience?
I'll
give two best lessons.
Probably one is don't hesitate to do the right thing. I regret two things. I regretted not walking out with the Black Caucus and Patsy Mink when Florida took the presidential election and the Supreme Court overstepped their boundaries and gave the presidency to Bush and not to Gore. And walking out in protest, I should have done it. I didn't know enough information, and I wasn't connected enough at that point because it was my first few months. But if I saw Patsy Mink go, I should have gone with her. The second is, Barbara Lee was right on the vote on the war on terrorism. I thought that we had developed the wording precisely enough to attack folks who did the 9/11, but she saw the terminology still too broad, and I didn't see it. And she was the only one that voted no on the war on terrorism. And now today we still have a declaration of war against terrorism, and we don't know what country they come from. So now the president can use the Alien Enemy Act of 1798 to incarcerate, deport, detain anybody based upon their own sentiment and reconstruct the concentration camps that the Japanese Americans had done it solely because they have that power. And so we just have to be able to act on what we believe on and bear the consequences, because over time we will be proven right that we did the right thing or we said the right thing.
Mm-hmm. That's a great lesson to share. Do you, similar to Fiona and Greg, do you guys have great lessons to share in your political experience?
Yeah, I would say I learned from my mentor, John Burton. he would always say, remember who brought you to the dance, darling. Meaning, have some sort of loyalty, okay, to the people who got you there, and don't, you know, look for shiny new objects and forget about all of your friends and supporters who helped you at the very beginning. Second, he would say, stand up for those who don't have a voice.
Right.
And the third, like Barbara Lee, stand up even if you are the only person standing up. So I think those are very good things I've learned from John Burton.
It's a lot of courage to stand up when you're only one who's standing up. What's your lesson, Greg, so far?
Yeah, I like the one about stand up even if you're the only one. I think it's really important to stand up for what's right, even if you're the minority. I remember last summer on city council, my colleagues were looking at racism against Black and brown people, and you know we're seeing this rise in Asian hate crimes, and I asked my colleagues to also include in their looking at racism against Asian Americans, because I've been hearing from my constituents that you know they're getting there's a pretty big increase in these kind of hate crimes, and my pretty much nobody else would back me. I was the only one no one else would back my motion to also add in racism against Asian Americans, even though Asian Americans in Palo Alto are 33% of the population. Yes. So I think it's important to stand up for what's right, even if you're the only one. The other thing I learned, and something which I think probably Mike and Fiona could probably talk about, is really to listen to all sides. I know a lot of times it's difficult to hear or to listen to people that disagree with you. But one of the things I found that is really informative is to hear the other opinion, even one that, in fact, I learned more from people I disagree with, because they usually are able to poke holes in my thinking. So I'm able to get stronger thinking. And it's one of the reasons why I hold office hours every Sundays, because I want to hear all sides. And so that's the other thing to think about is to actually engage. We're supposed to be representative of the people, but to really represent the people, we have to understand what they think. And the only way to understand what people think is to listen to all different sides, right? So if you're a Democrat, listen to a Republican, and vice versa, right? Listen to people, to perspectives that aren't necessarily your perspectives. And so when I hold office hours, I actually, and Tyler could talk about this, we kind of go out of our way to invite people from different sides to be in that meeting, to have that debate, because that's how you get to the truth, right? If you're in an echo chamber, you're only listening to yourself, you only listen to things that you agree with, you get very distorted perspectives. And I think that's part of what's the problem right now with politics, right? In general, especially at the higher level, is that there's a lot of partisanship. But sometimes there's a good idea that comes from a Democrat that Republicans should listen to. And sometimes there's a good idea from a Republican that a Democrat should listen to. And so not everything is bad because it comes from opposite sides of the aisle. Mm-hmm. And so I try to be a really good listener and really try to hear all different perspectives. And I hope other politicians would do this as well, because I think it's important. What's important is to move ahead, to get society moving forward, no matter whose idea it was, and less to, oh, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, or you voted for Trump, or you voted for Biden. I think we need to get past that, because we're in this tremendous gridlock right now.
Yeah.
And it's not good for anyone. So I think really what we should do is we look at what's best overall, the greatest good, and look for the best ideas, no matter who came up with it and what side's supporting it. And so I hope more politicians will do this, because I think that's what's needed to move our country forward.
Yeah, absolutely. With the country so divided, the unity is really the message, and looking into different people's perspective. So thanks so much for all the panels. I'm very privileged to moderate this panel. And now our time's up for the next panel. Thanks, Mike, Fiona, Greg, and Tyler. So you guys welcome to stay on the next panel. I will be, and then Greg has another engagement to move on to his next event. Thanks so much. I'm very grateful, Mike, Fiona, Greg, to be on the panel, and Tyler to join us too. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.